So there you go, you can see we did 52 damage. And because of our pact ability, we have a second attack. And in 2 hits, we have taken down a half-orc barbarian. The Warlock is an amazing class in Dungeons & Dragons, and this is going to be my Pure Archfey Warlock build. So, we're going to do this as normal. We're going to do level by level guide, some items you should have, and a combat tutorial. So, let's begin. So obviously we start with Warlock at level 1, and obviously we're going to take Eldritch Blast, the best cantrip in my opinion in the game. And I do also like Blade Ward. It's a really good spell if you know you're going to be taking some incoming damage. 9 times out of 10 you are probably going to want to use Eldritch Blast, but Blade Ward is another good option. The other thing you could do is Bone Chill. Prevent the target from healing until your next turn. An undead target receives disadvantage on attack rolls. Either of these, it kind of depends. If you have an enemy that you know will heal lots, if this is like your second playthrough or whatever, then in my opinion, Bone Chill is the way forward. And if you know that they've got a cleric with them who can do some healing spells, again, Bone Chill is a really nice way, if you're focusing on one enemy, to Bone Chill them so they can't heal and then take them down that way. And of course we are doing the Archfey, so this gives us Fey presence. Charm or frighten nearby foes with the Fey whilst bewildering, disturbing magics. Really amazing. Fairy Fire is everyone in the zone, if they fail their save, has advantage on all attacks against enemies that are lit up. Really, really powerful stuff. It is concentration though, bear that in mind. And we have access to Sleep, a spell that I don't really personally use, but if you find a way of doing it, it can be pretty helpful. Now I would personally switch these out, and I would take Hex, 1d6 extra damage, and it can be a bonus action, so you throw this up, Hex an enemy, and then you blast them with your Eldritch Blast. This is probably how 99% of Warlock players play, no matter the subclass. It's phenomenal. And then I would also take Hellish Rebuke, as you can use this as a reaction, and you can do 2 to 25 damage as a reaction. This coupled with some Eldritch Blast on your turn, which is a cantrip, and you will blast enemies and do so much damage. Okay, when it comes to your ability scores, we're going to have something that looks like this. We're going to have 8 in Strength, we're going to have 14 in Dex, because Dex affects our armor class, and it means we can use some finesse weapons. We're going to have 16 in Constitution, 10 Intelligence, 10 Wisdom, and 16 Charisma, because Charisma is our damage dealer for our spells and all sorts. And when it comes to proficiencies, we're going to have whatever you feel like, and just remember, this is mainly going to be a spellcaster type build, so we're really going to focus on Charisma, have our spells do as maximum damage as possible. Okay, Warlock level 2, we have 2 passives, and this will make sense when we get to them. For our spells, however, we are going to take the Armour of Agathis, so gain 5 temporary hit points and deals 5 cold damage, and this can be upscaled as you go through the game. And the Arms of Hadar, prevent a target from using reactions. Really good way of, if you want to get out of a melee area, using this spell and then running away, because a reaction would be an opportunity attack. Now of course we are going to take Agonizing Blast. When you cast Eldritch Blast, add your Charisma modifier to the damage it deals unless it is negative. Now ours is actually positive, ours is a +3 at the moment. This will be as high as possible as a +5 or a +6 if you follow my item guide. We will also take Repelling Blast. When you hit a creature with Eldritch Blast, you can push the creature up to 4.5 meters away from you. Really good way of throwing enemies off of ledges, that sort of stuff. Okay, Warlock level 3. Now we don't get subclass because we've already chosen it at level 1. And we have access to a bunch more spells. And first up, we're going to take Hold Person. I think this is such an underrated spell. Not only will you hold an enemy for yourself, you hold enemies for other characters, and suddenly every hit against a held enemy is a critical hit if this lands. And because we're going to be focusing on our Charisma to boost our spellcasting as high as possible, we have the highest chance of being able to have this succeed. Really good stuff. It is concentration though, so if you take damage it will be lost, but it's really good. And we're going to take Pact of the Blade. You can summon a Pact Weapon or bind the one you're wielding. Pact Weapon, you wield a spellcasting ability modifier, which means Charisma will now be used for our melee weapon attacks as well. Okay, Warlock level 4. We have our access to our first feat. And we're going to have access to another cantrip. I would take Minor Illusion to begin with. And when it comes to a spell, there are lots of options you could have. Mirror Image is really good. Basically increase your armor class by 9 to begin with. So if you are concentrating on a spell, this is a great way of keeping that spell alive. Darkness is also another really good spell. Throw this up and enemies can't see you. And Enthrall. Reduce a character's peripheral vision and make it look at you. If you want to become a tanky warlock, this is a great spell to use for that as well. And there is also Phantasmal Force. This is a great spell, but I personally wouldn't choose this over Hex. Both are concentration, and if you're going to use one or the other, Hex, in my opinion, is the way to go. So we'll be taking Mirror Image. And for our feat, obviously we're bumping our Charisma up to 18. Now, Warlock level 5, we have the health increase, but more importantly, we have Deepened Pact, which means that our weapon, if we were to do a melee attack, we now have an extra attack with that weapon. So we can engage enemies in melee, or we can Eldritch Blast them. And for your spell, the Hunger of Adar. This, in my opinion, is one of the best spells in the game. I put this in my top 10 list of spells for Baldur's Gate, and I still stand by that. You throw this up, and it's basically an AoE, where creatures that start their turn in the area take between 2 to 12 cold damage, and if they end their turn in the area, 2 to 18 acid damage. It's also considered difficult terrain, which means enemies will struggle to walk through it. Now for an Eldritch Invocation, Devil's Sight is the way forward here in my opinion. You can see normally in darkness, both magical and non-magical, up to 24 meters. Really good stuff, and this can come into play as we will see. Warlock level 6, Misty Escape. Upon taking damage, become invisible. On your next turn, you can cast a Misty Step, though this will break your invisibility. Amazing. You take damage, and suddenly you've disappeared. Such a good way of not only being able to hold your concentration for longer, because if you save your concentration roll and then become invisible, they cannot see you. And you also have the option of Misty Stepping. So if you become invisible, you could Misty Step to a higher ledge away from everyone, and then just blast them with Eldritch Blast. Such a versatile and amazing ability to give a Warlock. And for a spell, I would take Darkness here, and this ties into our Devil's Sight. We can throw Darkness on ourselves, and then we can just stand in it where people can't see us and hit them, hold our concentration and stuff. Really great way of tanking without even being in danger. Warlock level 7, we have one more passive and a bunch more spells. Now there are loads of good options here you might be tempted to take. For example, Counterspell, or Greater Invisibility. Some people like Blink, I'm not a big fan. Warlocks, in my opinion, especially this build, is more of a DPS controller. And I think Counterspell is best left to a Bard or something like that, where if you wish to use the spell slot to do that, then at least with the Warlock you've got your spell slots for things like Hex or Hold Person. If you're mainly going to be a Blaster type with this build, and you really only want to focus on Hex and Eldritch Blast, then Counterspell will work. You will still have the spell slots available to cast it. But if you wish to change up some of these spells and you want more damage dealing ones or more versatility, like you want to take Cloud of Daggers or you want to take Shatter, then Counterspell will eat into your spell slots. So just bear that in mind. Now with that being said, my two options here would be Blight, because it does max damage, or Counterspell. Now I think Counterspell is worth taking because it is a really good battlefield control spell, and if you can really just cast one spell per combat, which is either a Hex or a Hold Person, then you have no reason not to take Counterspell. But as I said, if you want to use loads of multiple spells, bear it in mind, Eldritch Blast is a cantrip, so it won't eat into your spell slots, another good thing to remember. So those would be my two options. I am going to take Counterspell. Okay, we have another Eldritch Invocation. Really here you could take anything. I actually really like the Book of Ancient Secrets because you get Ray of Sickness, Chromatic Orb, and Silence. You can cast these once per long rest, and they don't expend any spell slots. So essentially you just get 3 more damage dealing versatile spells. I say damage dealing, Silence isn't, but Ray of Sickness is really good, Chromatic Orb is really good. Silence can come in really handy if you have a spellcaster against you. Yeah, and it's 3 spells and they don't even eat into your spell slots. I think this is the way to go. Okay, Warlock level 8. Now we have access to another spell, and at this point I would take Blight. And our ability score improvement, we are buffing our Charisma to 20. Okay, Warlock level 9, we have another passive and a bunch more spells. Now there is Dominate Person. Make a humanoid fight against you. Very, very good if you can land this. However, it does use a Wisdom saving throw against you, so bear that in mind. Hold Monster is basically, as I've said before, Hold Person, but on steroids. And Banishment from the last round I still think is a really good spell if you can land it, because it just takes them off the battlefield for a round. My picks were between any of these three. For this one I will take Dominate Person just to show you how it works. And for another Eldritch Invocation we are going to take the Minions of Chaos, and we'll get a Conjure Elemental, which means we just have a summon on the battlefield. Okay, Warlock level 10, we have Beguiling Defenses. So, cannot be charmed, which ties into the very first level where we have the ability to charm enemies. We have one more cantrip, so again, take whatever you feel like. We're going to take Blade Ward, which was my first option. And now here I would take Hold Monster. Warlock level 11, we have more spells and access to Mystic Arcanum. This will not use any spell slots, but all are so good. Circle of Death is a mass damage dealing necrotic spell. Arcane Gate basically allows you to teleport between two areas. Eye Bite is mass damage as well. Flesh to Stone, so basically you just petrify an enemy and it can't do anything. And Create Undead, which means you could raise a corpse. This really depends, there's no wrong answer here in my opinion. Create Undead basically will give you another minion to go alongside your elemental. Flesh to Stone is basically kind of like Hold Monsters, so maybe hold off on this. Eye Bite is really good. Like, really, really good. Arcane Gate, maybe steer clear of this one as well. I personally would take Circle of Death. And at this point I would take Judgment. And we're on our final level, which is Warlock level 12. We have more spells we can choose, so at this point I would take Hypnotic Pattern. And we have Life Drinker. Your melee attacks deal an additional necrotic damage equal to your Charisma modifier. This is the only option to take here. There are multiple things you could do here. You could take like Savage Attacker, anything like that. And we're going to bump our Constitution up to 18. Okay, so that was our build, levels 1 to 12, done. Now let's go with some items, and the most important one is the Birthright. This is a hat that boosts your Charisma up to 22. And now again, Charisma is used for our melee weapons, for extra damage, for our spell casting. Essentially, this just buffs everything, and that's exactly what we want. When it comes to a cloak, I really like the Cloak of the Weave. This gives you a +1 bonus to your spell save DC and spell attack rolls, which means we just have more chance of landing things like Hold Monster and stuff like that. It also means we can absorb elemental damage once per short rest, so if you're up against something you know only does fire damage, you can trigger this and then, alas, you have half damage. The Evasive Shoes, +1 to armor class, which I think is key, because the higher the armor class, the more chance of holding our concentration spells. When it comes to gloves, I really like the Gemini gloves. Cantrips targeting foes and allies can target an additional creature. The same target can be chosen twice. Really good stuff, however, you do need to toggle this, so bear that in mind. The Ring of Regeneration, at the beginning of your turn, the ring activates and heals you 1 to 4 hit points. The Strange Conduit Ring, while concentrating on a spell, the wearer's weapon attacks deal an additional 1 to 4 psychic damage. Now for a necklace, there's loads of options. I quite like just having the healing option, so I like throwing on the Amulet of Restoration. This is interchangeable. Same with armor, I've gone for very basic light armor. Bear in mind, if you do pick human, this is the only thing you will have proficiency with, but this does give you a +1 to your initiative, so bear that in mind. And for a weapon, you could take multiple weapons because you're just going to bind them as your packed weapon, but for this I am going to take the Charge Bound Warhammer. 1d10 damage plus 1d6 lightning damage when it is bound as our packed weapon. And bear in mind, even though we are not proficient with a Warhammer, once we bind it as our packed weapon, we become proficient with it. So, let's go find some combat, show you this build in play. Okay, so before you do anything, make sure you bind your packed weapon. So, bind packed weapon. There we go. And make sure you have toggled your Adroit caster on. This is from your Gemini gloves. And let's pick the fight. Okay, as you can see, we just took damage, and we can show off our Misty Escape ability. And alas, we are now invisible. Okay, it is now Will's turn, and as you can see, we have the ability to Misty Step because of our Misty Escape. So if we were to do this, and to come up to here, you can see we are now out of danger. Now, unfortunately, we are stuck up here, but that's not necessarily a bad thing, because we have the chance to now do things like our Hex. So we could do a Charisma Hex, and we will cast it on... We'll do the big Barbarian. Apparently they want to move out the way. Not quite sure why I wanted to do that, but okay. And because we are in melee, we will just show off how regular attacks work with this packed weapon. So there you go, you can see we did an insane amount of damage just then. If we come into our combat log, you will see we hit 22 damage because it was a critical. So all in all, we did 13 from Life Drinker, 4 Necrotic, 5 Psychic, 8 Lightning, 22 Bludgeoning, for a grand total of around 52 damage. And because of our packed ability, we have a second attack. And in 2 hits, we have taken down a half-orc Barbarian. Now, unfortunately, we did take damage, so we have lost our Hex, but we have Hellish Rebuke. And there you go, that is another bulk damage. In fact, that was 31 damage from a reaction, which means our rogue could come in here and finish it off. Okay, and we've done all that without even casting a spell yet. So let's come up here, and let's actually show off some of our spells now. So we could do our Hex again. Okay, so we can come up here and start blasting now. We have our Adroit caster toggled on, which means instead of having 3 Eldritch Blasts, we can now do 4. And alas, another way of just killing enemies really, really quick. Now, bear in mind, Adroit caster only works once per short rest, so it will have to be refreshed, but this is just a really nice, quick way of just dealing extra damage. Now, if we were to come up here, we still have multiple spells we haven't even shown off yet. So, let's start doing some stuff like Circle of Death. This was our free ability we had, and we'll just place it here. And you can see, unfortunately, they made the save, so they only took 19 damage, but even still, 19 is insane. And we can come back in here, reapply our Hex. Although for some reason it wants me to be in melee now, which I don't understand why. Now we have other things, like you could do your Fey Presence, which we haven't had to test out because of how much DPS we've been dealing. But for this, you will mostly be doing your Eldritch Blast. Okay, we are going to Eldritch Blast again, 95% chance, and we'll see how a regular, just normal 3-shot works. And there you go, a huge amount of damage, thrown back as well. Okay, now that we're here, we're going to close the distance a little bit, and we're going to try off our Fey Presence. And we can do Disturbing or Bilingual. Let's try Disturbing, and we'll see if it works. And there you go, the enemy is now frightened, which means if we come in here, cannot move, and have disadvantage on ability checks and attack rolls. Really top stuff from a Warlock. And as you can see, they are just frozen, still managed to land a hit, but they are unable to go anywhere. And we can come in here and we can finish the fight off with another huge 22 points of damage. And that is what makes the Fey Warlock so powerful, is the buff to your DPS. It's all charisma focused. You have such good battlefield control, whether it's escaping, whether it's holding monsters, frightening people in a massive circle. It's so powerful and versatile, and it's so worth trying out. If you have enjoyed, please let me know in the comments below, and let me know what you changed as well. There's multiple ways you can do this, but in my opinion, this is my favourite way, especially with the giant hammer. I think it's just so much fun. If you have enjoyed, please also drop the video a like. It helps me amazingly. And if you're new and you haven't subscribed but you'd like to, that would also be amazing. And hopefully, I will see you guys in the next video. Bye, guys.